night my parents told me to leave, there wasn't even a pause for discussion. No hesitation. No, let's talk about this. Just a quiet, final decision delivered like a verdict that had been waiting years to be spoken. My mother stood in the doorway of my room, arms crossed, her expression already hardened into something that didn't recognize me as her daughter anymore. Behind her, my father lingered, silent but firm, the kind of silence that meant agreement without needing words. And somewhere down the hall, my pregnant sister cried softly, as if her tears alone justified everything. She needs the room, my mother said, flat and absolute. You'll have to figure something out. I stared at her, not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. This wasn't about space. This wasn't about urgency. This was about what it had always been about, her. My sister had always been the center, the priority, the fragile one who needed everything. And I had always been the extra piece, the one expected to bend, to adjust, to disappear when necessary. Tonight was just the most honest version of that truth. You're really kicking me out? I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. My father finally spoke. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder. The word echoed in my mind like a joke no one else could hear. As if I had been the one making things difficult all these years. As if quietly accepting second place in my own family hadn't been hard enough already. I almost laughed, but the sound stayed trapped in my chest. I turned back into my room, closing the door gently, not slamming it like I wanted to. The familiar space looked different now, like it had already begun to reject me. The walls held memories I wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. Every late night, every small victory I had celebrated alone, every moment I had tried to prove I was worth noticing, it all felt distant now, like it had happened to someone else. I pulled my suitcase out slowly, the zipper loud in the quiet room. My hands moved automatically, folding clothes, packing essentials, choosing what mattered enough to take. The truth was, almost everything I cared about wasn't something I could carry. It was time, effort, sacrifice, years of working quietly, saving carefully, planning something I had never told them about. Because they never asked. That thought settled over me as I packed. Not once had they asked how I managed to pay for my own expenses, how I had built a steady income, how I had slowly become independent while still living under their roof. To them, I had always just been there. Background. Replaceable. My phone buzzed on the bed. I picked it up and saw the message I had been waiting for all week. A confirmation. Short. Formal. Final. Ownership transfer complete. I stared at the words, my heart beating slower instead of faster. Not shock. Not excitement. Just a calm, steady awareness that something had shifted in a way no one else in this house understood yet. I locked the phone and slipped it into my pocket, the weight of it suddenly feeling heavier than before. Outside, I could hear my mother already talking about moving furniture, about making space for a crib, about preparing the house for a baby that hadn't even arrived yet. My name wasn't mentioned once. It was like I had already been erased. When I stepped back into the hallway with my suitcase, they were waiting. Of course they were. My mother looked relieved, like a problem had been solved efficiently. My father gave me a short nod, approval without warmth. My sister glanced at me, guilt flickering across her face, but not strong enough to stop any of this. "Where will you go?" she asked softly. I met her eyes for a moment. There was a time I would have reassured her, told her not to worry, made this easier for her. But that time had passed. "I'll be fine," I said. It wasn't reassurance. It was a fact. My father opened the front door, holding it like a silent command. I walked past him without hesitation, the night air cool against my skin. Each step away from the house felt lighter, not heavier. Not like I was losing something, but like I was finally stepping out of something that had been holding me back for years. At the edge of the driveway, I stopped. Not because I was unsure. Because I wanted to remember this moment exactly as it was. They thought they had taken everything from me. They thought they had the power. They thought this house, this life, belonged to them. I looked back once, just once, at the place they had so easily pushed me out of. And for the first time, I smiled. Because they had no idea. They had just kicked out the owner. Part 2. I didn't return that night. Not because I couldn't, but because I wanted them to sit in their certainty for a little while longer. I wanted them to feel comfortable in the version of reality they had created, where I was gone, where everything had fallen into place exactly as they wanted. Sometimes, the truth hits harder when it interrupts comfort instead of conflict. I spent the night in a small hotel across town, lying awake and staring at the ceiling. Not sad, not angry, just thinking, replaying every moment that had led up to this. Every time I had been overlooked. Every decision made without me. Every silent sacrifice I had made while they assumed I had nothing of value to offer. It all felt distant now, like a story I had finally finished reading. By morning, I was ready. I dressed carefully, not to impress them, but to remind myself who I was. Someone who had built something real. Someone who had made decisions quietly, patiently, without needing validation. I picked up the folder from my bag, the documents inside crisp, official, undeniable, and walked out. When I reached the house, nothing had changed on the outside. The same door, the same windows, the same illusion of control. But inside, everything was about to shift. I let myself in. The sound of my footsteps immediately drew attention. My mother appeared first, her expression tightening the moment she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, irritation sharp in her voice. My father stood up from the couch, his posture stiff. My sister sat nearby, her hand resting on her stomach again, eyes wide with uncertainty. "I think we need to talk," I said calmly. "There's nothing to talk about," my mother snapped. "You left." "No," I corrected gently. "You told me to leave." The distinction mattered. I could see it in the way my father's expression shifted slightly, even if he didn't admit it. I stepped forward and placed the folder on the table. "This is what we need to talk about." My father hesitated before picking it up. He flipped it open, scanning the first page, then the second. His face changed slowly, like the meaning was sinking in piece by piece. Confusion, disbelief, then something heavier. "What is this?" he asked, his voice no longer steady. "It's the deed," I said. The room went quiet. My mother moved closer, trying to see for herself. "That's not possible," she said quickly, almost instinctively. "This house was transferred months ago," I finished. "Legally." My sister's hand dropped from her stomach. "Wait, what?" I watched them carefully, not with anger, but with clarity. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth finally taking up space where it had always been ignored. "You never asked," I said. "You never cared how I was managing, what I was doing, what I was building. You just assumed I had nothing. That doesn't make this okay," my mother said, her voice rising. "No," I replied quietly. "What's not okay is being treated like I don't belong in my own home." The words landed harder than anything else I had said. My father closed the folder slowly, his grip tightening. "So what are you saying?" I met his gaze directly. "I'm saying, you don't get to throw me out anymore." Silence followed, not the dismissive silence I was used to, but a heavy, unavoidable one. My sister looked between us, her expression shifting from confusion to realization. For the first time, she seemed to understand that this wasn't just about her needing space. This was about years of imbalance finally correcting itself. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. I took a breath. Now, things change. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The power in the room had already shifted. "You can stay," I continued. "But not like before. No more decisions without me. No more treating me like I'm temporary. This is my house. And if I'm here, I'm not invisible anymore." My mother didn't argue. My father didn't interrupt. And my sister, she just nodded slowly, like she was finally seeing me for the first time. I picked up my suitcase and walked past them, back toward my room. Not the room they had tried to take. The room that had always been mine. This time, when I stepped inside, it felt different. Not because anything had changed physically, but because finally, I had.